Replay, remix, replay. Just made a mistake. If your character was in this position, you would have died. I get to live. Replay, remix. I get to live. You would have died.
I love character design in games, and lately somebody has taken my notice. So it's about time I talked about Ekko, the boy who shattered time. In this video, I will be discussing his lore, asking what kind of character is created and shown through his backstory, his visuals, looking everywhere from his splash art to his model and animations, and how his personality is represented. And how does this influence the way you play him? And his gameplay. Does the gameplay complement the character, and is it entertaining? This video will be an analysis of the League of Legends character, Ekko. I will not be mentioning the series Arcane, and it should always be noted that this is all just opinions. The first thing I wish to talk about is his backstory. I am only going to discuss the biography story. However, I understand there is more lore to be found within the game Convergence and the Lullaby story. Now, this backstory accomplishes many things. It reveals how Ekko gained some of his core personality traits, such as his confidence, intelligence, and free-spiritedness. These are 3 of the main traits I will refer back to throughout this video. To begin with, he's shown confidence not only in taking the untested device up the clock tower, but where it reads, "They dared each other to new heights of foolishness," knowing Ekko had the means to pluck them out of danger. Ekko appears to take on a leadership role within the group. It is written that Ekko's friends didn't just trust Ekko could save them, but instead used the verb knew, reveals that it wasn't even a question for his friends. They knew Ekko could save them, no matter what. One could also argue that the admiration towards Ekko from his friends would have boosted his self-confidence. This would have given us the confident and quote-unquote daring character we can play today. Moving on to how his intelligence was conveyed, it is made abundantly clear from the first line that this will be a key part of Ekko. After all, he was born with genius intellect. He even constructed simple machines before he could crawl. This is the introductory line, which is interesting because it leaves the reader at a point where they still need more information. This contrasts the reader with Ekko himself. Ekko already has a lot of knowledge, but we are left in the dark. I also want to note they brought him down to earth and humanized Ekko. Ekko is initially presented this way as to tell the reader that his intuition will be of great consequence. After all, Ekko creates the Zero Drive in the end. From birth, Ekko was intelligent and innovative. Finally, his freedom is conveyed in multiple points in the story. For example, when he experimented madly with the crystal. This line is interesting because we're told how powerful the crystal is, and yet Ekko doesn't appear to be careful with it. The writers used the adverb madly, which, when describing Ekko, is out of place in comparison to the rest of his story. Ekko is described as intelligent and definitely sane. Madly just isn't fitting or in character from what we have seen. I believe this was simply due to the fact that Ekko was excited to hold all of this power he had heard legends about. The writers wanted to convey that he had limitless powers in his hands, and again, this humanizes the character, making them more relatable. One could argue that he could be described as mad no matter how he experimented with the crystal due to it being so powerful, him tampering with it. It's dangerous. But to be able to experiment on something so limitless without restrictions of your own requires true freedom. That concludes the biography section. Here we have set up 3 of the core personality traits Ekko has. These will be repeated throughout the analysis. Now going into his visuals, I would like to begin with his splash art. Ekko's splash art is very well composed. The lighting immediately draws your attention to Ekko's face, where you see the face paint and weapon. The artist clearly wanted to focus on his love for Zord that we hear in the story. Note how dark the lighting is, with only half his body being illuminated and the other half being in shadow. This soft lighting isn't trying to draw your attention to Ekko too much. This is also evident by the fact that Ekko is not centered in the frame. No, the brightest thing in the image are his paradoxes and equipment. This is a testament to the impact these revelations had on his character. Also, he is never shown to be an outwardly arrogant character. Whilst none would call him modest, he is nothing like Draven or some Piltover characters like Camille. He doesn't attempt to flaunt things, unless you stand in his way, for which you will be continually reminded of his self-confidence. Therefore, having the lighting be less forceful reflects this. The storytelling was clearly a focus here. While sacrificing the image's ability to depict the character visually, it does a great job at revealing small parts of his personality, such as a paradox can be seen running on the left. However, we see Ekko sitting still. Whatever caused Ekko to run in one timeline does not bother our Ekko. Ekko has learnt, and now he has another display of his confidence. Color-wise, Ekko has some interesting connotations. The bat and his abilities are all this turquoise color. They're very bright, which is odd because Hextech is usually represented by a darker hue. Let's look at Heimerdinger, for example. The reasoning for this is because Ekko is from Zorn, and Zorn has a color motif of green. Therefore, using turquoise instead of a deeper blue would represent what Ekko fights for. He fights because of his love for Zorn. On another note, the general roundness of his character, especially within his trousers, but also his general build, this tells us that he's not a malicious character. This checks out with how he's presented within his story as someone who is helpful. Now onto his model. Ekko's model was made in 2015, and upon first inspection it instantly tells of his resourcefulness. The asymmetrical stitches and band on his left arm connote him having to scrounge around for his clothing. Ekko is an uncontrollable character. He says so himself.
No one keeps me down.
And this is encapsulated by the asymmetry and comically large mohawk. This mohawk is fashion of 1980s punk, an aesthetic that the nation of Zorn is known for. Ekko is from Zorn, and so references to his origins culture are commonplace in his design, such as the hourglass face paint, also doubling as a time theme reference, and bright coloration of his clothing. I feel this also reinforces his freedom, again due to the 1980s punk aesthetics. Moving on to his hood and belt, each with bright coloration and metallic pieces. In the hood, he has his welding goggles, which are a dark, murky grey metal, whilst the belt is leather with a vibrant green hue around a similarly metallic core. The metallic core actually makes an hourglass shape. This time is subtly placed right into the core of his model, as a metaphor for the time theme reference, constantly being reused in his character. Ekko shows why having a core design philosophy is so important. Having a philosophy to focus around, in this case a concept of time, allowed Riot to create a unique character without random or unnecessary components. Every part of Ekko's design can be explained. Behind his back also is the Z drive itself, although in my opinion it's incredibly uninteresting. Perhaps the simplicity of it is purposeful. One could see it being a nature of his materials. Also note that it is hand-powered by him pulling a cord. Ekko being able to create so much with so little proves that he is very intelligent, once again. Of course, I cannot go without mentioning his signature weapon, this weird glowing bat thing. This bat accomplishes many things. It stands out even from League's awkward perspective. It's unique enough also to act as his personal weapon, and it helps set the chrono color scheme for his abilities and attacks. This bright weapon shows Ekko's confidence by making him clear and visible. He doesn't hide behind a shadow or modest colorations. Ekko is a confusing character. He wasn't made to fit the Time Mage archetype. No, that's the role of Zillion. He wasn't made to fit the Scientist archetype. No, that's the role of Victor or Heimerdinger. Ekko is Riot's take on the scrappy inventor, an extremely unique take on the scrappy inventor. And it goes without saying that Rumble is also an example of the scrappy inventor archetype. Or maybe it does need saying. Who remembers Rumble? Not Riot, that's for sure. Now on to his idle animations. They're very, very confusing. His first one has him crouched down and ready to move. He's continuously looking around him as well, with his bat poised and ready to swing. His second one, however, is the complete opposite. He positions his bat behind his head and just looks around, cracks his neck, does this little hop. Both, of course, have this exaggerated and stretchy breathing animation, commonplace across the entirety of League of Legends. This helps you to see the animation while in League's awkward framing. Being able to see Ekko breathe makes the character feel more alive. The first idle animation is more tense. Ekko surveys for dangers and is ready to counterattack. While in this animation, the player is encouraged to move and act. Riot did this because ideally in League, you're never truly standing still or doing nothing. However, the second idol is more calm. Ekko relaxes while still keeping himself spry and ready to move. In this animation, the player is less encouraged to act. Riot did this as a middle ground between action and inaction. They don't want to encourage total inaction, and therefore the animation still contains a deal of movement. That concludes Ekko's visual design. Here we have now figured out what Ekko's design is attempting to tell us, and where he fits within the game itself. Now into his gameplay. I will begin with recognizing Ekko as part of the Slayer class, which is split between skirmishers and assassins. Ekko is of the assassin grouping. This puts him in the same group as champions like Talon, Akali, and Nocturne. He wants to jump in, burst down something squishy, and escape before the opposition can retaliate. High damage, high mobility, no defense. Ekko builds AP, which means he focuses on using abilities for damage. Here is a rundown on his abilities. Ekko's passive is simple, yet it controls how you play this champion, standing as proof that you don't need overloaded abilities to create interesting gameplay. His passive, Z-Drive Resonance, causes all of Ekko's attacks to inflict a stack of resonance. After 3 stacks, Ekko deals a burst of magic damage to the target and, if the target was a champion, gains a speed boost. This is the core of Ekko's gameplay, as the damage is no joke either. You run in, proc your passive, and use the speed boost to be absolutely anywhere else than where your opponents can stun lock wombo combo you. Note that all attacks proc this passive. Abilities and auto attacks can both make use of it. You have to be smart with how you time your abilities to make best use of his passive, as it has got a cooldown per target. As mentioned before, Ekko's core design philosophy is around time. In the rest of his abilities, you will see how Ekko's player must plan ahead and be wise with them. Ekko's Q is a mid-range skill shot. It has 890 total range, which puts it at a similar range to Ari's Orb of Deception. It also passes through all entities. Ekko throws a temporal grenade that after hitting a champion or travelling 700 units expands. This expanded projectile moves slower for 1.25 seconds, before quickly retracting back to Ekko. This is Ekko's neutral game tool. Use it to poke, but you must plan your spacing properly to get the maximum damage from the initial projectile and its return. His W is a long-range AoE explosion. Ekko begins firing parallel convergence, and after 2 whole seconds, it actually lands. Enemies cannot see this area yet, however allies can. After landing, it takes 2.5 seconds, during which enemies can now see it, for it to expand into a field. This field is an AoE slow with a small amount of damage for 1.5 seconds. If Ekko enters this field, every enemy within gets stunned for an infuriating 2.25 seconds. It also grants him a shield. This ability is very difficult to land due to the 4.5 total seconds of preparation time before it actually does anything. You need to predict where the opposition will try to be, about 5 seconds in the future. However, if you land the stun, you get a shield and the perfect engage opportunity. This ability has a very long cooldown, it's obscene. However, this is perfect. To use this ability correctly, you need perfect planning. You need to act like you've fought the enemy before and know what they will do next. It's perfect for Ekko's reoccurring time theme. Ekko's E, Phase Dive, is very simple. Ekko dashes a short distance and empowers his next auto attack to have increased range and teleport him to his target as well. His E can be used to reposition for landing the return on his Q. It can also jump over short walls, which allows for better positioning. Paired with the teleport, and you can have an assassin's perfect engage tool. I will also take this time to note what makes Ekko's tech different in comparison to other champion tech. Let's look at Heimerdinger. He places turrets that automatically shoot at nearby things. Or at Victor, who has a robotic arm to fire a laser for him. For everything Ekko creates, he needs manual input to make it work. For example, the Time Winder must be manually thrown before it works. The parallel convergence gets battered to its location. Phase Dive begins with Ekko physically rolling, which charges the dash. This is the thing that makes Ekko's time abilities feel different to a mage like Zillion's, or his technology feel different to something like Victor's. Ekko is scrappy, and made all of this tech with the resources he had. The tools requiring his physical input, instead of being magical or automatic, reflect his hard-working personality. And finally, Ekko's ultimate, Chronograph. Ekko's ultimate has a passive component, where an afterimage follows Ekko around. This afterimage is exactly where Ekko was 4 seconds ago. Upon activation of the ultimate, he returns to this location and deals an enormous chunk of magic damage, and also heals for a percentage of the damage he took in the last 4 seconds. Now, I cannot tell you the purpose of this ability. It has way too many. Some would say an infinite amount of uses. Here's just 4 off the top of my head. Diving turrets, escaping bad engagers, finishing off enemies, and nuking some health bars. However, again, the best way to use it is with careful timing and planning so that your paradox, although I prefer to call them echoes, is exactly where you need it to be at the right time. But if you've played Ekko, you know I've been holding back here. Ekko isn't just using his intelligence to plan in accordance with time, and I think he says it best himself in an extremely memorable line from his cinematic, Seconds.
Here's the thing about time. If you can't make the most out of any given moment, then you don't deserve a single extra second.
Now, while playing Ekko, yes, you do plan ahead. You make many plans. But life is tricky and messy. The plans will have to change at any given moment. And you must seize every second. Let's look over his abilities again with this new frame of mind. Ekko's Q is great for proccing his passive, due to it being an auto attack reset and being able to proc your passive twice by itself. You never know when your opponent will misposition slightly, so you need to be ready to throw this out for a sudden punishment. Ekko's W can be used when you get caught out of position to guard your escape route. This can cause dilemmas for your opposition. They can chase you and risk what happens when they get stunned, or they can back off for a moment and lose you in the chase. If they dare to walk through the zone, punish them accordingly. Ekko's E is great for dodging skill shots and then immediately retaliating, knowing that your opponent's ability is now on cooldown. It's also an auto attack reset, which means you can proc your passive even quicker. You can also use enemy minions, neutral enemies, and structures to teleport a short distance if you need to escape. Ekko's R creates sudden opportunities you didn't realize were about to exist, or better stated, that already existed 4 seconds ago. It allows you to damage an area you didn't realize the opponents would dare to pass. Did you think about using the ultimate to return to lane after buying items? Bonus points if you recall in a riskier location, so the enemies foolishly walk into that area. I wasn't lying when I said there was an infinite number of possibilities with this ability, because Ekko doesn't have limits, and
If there are limits, I haven't found them yet.
Ekko is intelligent, but he was not lying when he said he only needs seconds. When you play as Ekko, you are forced to act as Ekko. Be quick-witted and resourceful. Ekko has a perfectly designed kit that, since release, has undergone very few changes, those being his passive used to be able to slow the enemy, and that's it. Riot likely removed this due to redundancy, because Ekko already gained a speed boost, so he would be faster than his opponent. His passive was given increased damage to jungle monsters at some point, so that he could become a jungler. This role suits Ekko because his kit is very good at premeditated assaults. His W is much more effective as a jungler than while in the lanes. Apart from those, most of what has happened to Ekko includes minor number changes, many bug fixes and adjustments just to how his abilities interact with the world to improve quality of life. This makes his kit simply better than the likes of many champions who have needed features removed from their kit. He also holds a flawless 50.2% win rate. He's not overpowered, he's not underpowered, he's perfect. In conclusion, Ekko is effectively depicted with his core traits in mind. those being the confidence, intelligence, and freedom we have come to love. These core traits are repeated often, as to avoid overloading the character with unknown traits chucked in once during a passive. By having core traits, Riot Games stayed within reasonable lines for his abilities. His gameplay is well balanced and rewarding, and above all, it fits together with his character. Ekko is a shining example of how one fits good character design into entertaining gameplay. Little bonus section looking at the concept art. This section will just be a little delve into his concept art and why I think some decisions were made. Ekko's weapon was planned to have many more complex animations. However, I believe that because of game limitations on what we could actually make out and see, and theming, they decided to stick to more basic flashes of light. Complex visual effects wouldn't suit Ekko's straightforward batting attacks as well. That is quite crude generally, so complexity just wouldn't have fit well. With this idle pose exploration page, I find it interesting how all of the poses originally were more poised and straightforward. The jump between the rough and ready pose we have now is immense. I believe it simply just didn't fit Ekko to be so still. And with his previous designs, the main reoccurring issue was that it was too weighty to be on an assassin. Ekko is played as a mobile assassin, but with these large squares along his chest made him too bulky, not to mention the sheer volume of this glove. Anyways, that's all I've got for today. Thank you to Ruther from the Ekko Mains Discord for supplying some of the footage.